what was strange for me, and maybe you've experienced this too, but coming from the Cassandra world, the CAA world, so much of what you do, we're Magnetic or any kind of B2B company is just pitch and decks and decks. And
Yes,
there's so much
yes.
emphasis on the deck.
Live in the deck world.
And I was like,
Hi, everybody. It's Yunche Wilson, your fractional CMO. And you know exactly what I do. I build authenticity in B2B marketing. And today I have Rachel Saunders with me, who is a researcher and a cultural strategist. And she's going to dive into all of that and all of the goodies here for us. So, this show, we talk about everything and anything to do with B2B marketing, and we leave no stone unturned. And we are going to dive into Rachel's specific industry, what she has encountered. And as you know, we just have a conversation and you get to join in on the fun. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being with me.
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. So, cultural strategist, let's dive into that.
Yeah, cultural strategy. It's really just a fancy term for me applying research to help brands and entertainers navigate shifts in consumer culture. So that could be anything from, social good is becoming more important to consumers than it was in the past. So how do we get in there and create either marketing or entertainment that's going to resonate with them without being, you can go the wrong way with social good and make it too heavy handed or fall flat. Mm-hmm. And then you can do it the right way, which is showing people that you take a stance on something that you care about as a company, but that it's really authentic to who you are as a brand. It's not just trying to jump on a movement maybe and take advantage of it, because that will obviously not resonate with people either. In fact, we've seen a lot of that in the past year, especially, with COVID. More and more. Consumers have really been driving this change for a while now, especially younger consumers. It's so important to Gen Z for companies to take a stance. But now we're hearing a lot more from employees as well, that they want their companies to take a stance as well for different social issues. In fact, Gartner did a study that I was reading recently. I think it's something like 75% of employees want their companies to take a stance on the issues today.
Those are huge numbers.
A lot of pressure. It's a lot of, it's good. I think it's great. It drives social change, but it's also a lot of pressure, I think, for CMOs, CEOs. You don't want to, I think a lot of the times people would just play it safe in the past by just staying silent or not getting involved, or they don't want to say the wrong thing and then have backlash. But it's something that people have to think about now more than ever. And
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think you bring up an interesting point about just social good being at the forefront, because we're not only dealing with COVID, we're dealing with the movement of racial equality and equity. And companies are saying, okay, we clearly have to take a public stance on this, but how do they tie it to ROI? Because that's all B2B companies know. It's like everything we do is got to tie to ROI. ROI,
the magic letters. We're Magnetic, the experiential agency I worked at. We were always talking about ROE, which is return on emotion, which I guess is another, kind of a catchphrase. But I think it's so important for brands to be thinking about these things, not just about in terms of numbers, but like a long-term, not just a transaction, but the emotional relationship you have with consumers. So thinking about like, how are you long-term going to build emotional relationships with people based on what's happening in the world, not just to get them to buy something once or, retweet your campaign.
Right. All about building that community, right? I think that's a really hard thing for B2B companies to get, especially, and I think we should preface this by saying B2B companies are not just like the blue chip companies. They're not the big logos. B2B companies are anyone who owns a business. These are restaurant owners. These are people who own bakeries. These are there's so many different types, right? So, being able to push the needle, even, the tech companies, the startups, these are all B2B companies. And I think there has to be a massive change that happens in marketing now, simply because it's a requirement. And earlier when we were chatting, you were talking about how data is moving the needle. And I'd love for you to dive into that a little bit more, because in my world where I grew up in the tech industry. So Gartner was God for everything.
Totally.
And, anytime you needed consulting, you went to the big five. But now the world has changed, because people like me are saying, Well, even the big five are out of date. They don't get people. They are only focused on data. They're not, really relating, or they don't actually do the implementation work and pivot based on that effectively.
Let's be honest. And I mean, I'm on the research side and I love it and it's what drives my business, but I also get that like having the numbers is one thing, understanding how to put them to practice in a way that it's not too literal to numbers, because people are not we're emotional beings. You can't just look at this insight and take it at face value on its own. You have to kind of look at the bigger picture of what's going on in the world. But yeah, so data. One thing I will say is that while I like that data is informing creativity and it's informing these decisions, it used to be in the past just kind of creatives in their ivory tower making decisions based on something that they thought would be really cool. Like, hey, this is neat and this is innovative, let's try it. But now you really need to understand in advance, what that, I guess the ROI is going to be. But measuring things and like, I don't have the answer for this, but what I'd like to see is like, what is that ROI beyond a sale? It's like, okay, so experiences, here's a great example. And I'll just compare it to like a wedding for now. Like really, people can get married at City Hall and that's great, and it's going to cost less. And the ROI, like you're still married at the end and it costs you a lot less.
That's right.
But you get all this emotional investment when you do host a wedding and you have people there. And, the ROI, I mean, if you just looked at it like that, like people would not have weddings throughout cultures and times, but people continue to do this because they know there's this long-term emotional investment in having these kind of events. And of course, we see that with brand experiences as well. And it's so much harder now with COVID. You can't really host these in-person events where you get to have these different sensory experiences and the emotional connections that come out of just being in the physical world. But I think we know that they're so important, but we can't really put our finger on what the value is, but we know it's there. So people are trying to crack that. I think there's a lot of the stuff I've seen, and maybe you've seen some other things, but it's kind of gimmicky sometimes. It's like emotional tracking technology. It's like, oh, they smiled more. It's like, well, yeah, human can see that more people are smiling as well. You don't necessarily need, you just need an emotionally intelligent group of people kind of reading the room. You don't necessarily need technology to tell you that. But I don't know. I will be interested to see how people figure out measurements.
I'm curious to know, given all of your data work and everything you've done as a researcher, you've been able to kind of really be on the front lines of some amazing, experiential types of things that have really pushed the needle for brands. So from a B2B aspect, how do you, especially over like the last year, what have you seen be the biggest changes like so far, like the biggest changes in marketing and experiential things? Given that, we can't have these in-person things. So how are they engaging?
Yeah, it's almost kind of this old school approach I've seen a little bit more. It's you get the one hand, you get like the very spammy companies on LinkedIn who just like, you get all the messages where it's very generic and you can tell that they haven't actually, done any digging into who you are as a person or a company. It's kind of, they just have some, AI inputting your name and then the same blanket statement. You get a lot of that, but then you get the people who really make an effort to, when I say people, I also mean, the companies, they make an effort to form a relationship with you. They'll do a little digging into like, okay, well, what do you like as a person? Maybe we can't go to, a concert together, or we can't go to a talk together, or just good old fashioned drinks, but what can we do digitally? Can I like send you something physically? And then, we have wine, over video chat that way. It's more of like the old school relationship building. It's almost like dating with swipe culture. You get the people who just want to swipe, and then you get the people who are in it for a relationship. And I think that interestingly in this era, the people who are going for the relationship are doing better than the ones who are just trying to spam your LinkedIn, inbox, or your email with the same kind of generic message. So it's finding those little personal touch points, personalizing, customizing, and just emotional intelligence more than anything. Like I was talking to someone the other day at a big a very, very big Fortune 500 company. And he was saying that, he gets hit up all the time for people who want to advertise with him. And then there was one company who realized, they really, they took the time to notice that he really likes like electronic music. And so they formed a conversation with him about that. And they invited him to a show once this is all over. They're like, let's make plans and let's go see, once COVID's over, we've got to go see this concert. And I think he also had like, they created a custom Spotify playlist for him and sent that over, and use that as kind of a touch point to form that relationship. So it's not just about, here's what I can sell you, and here's my value proposition. It's more of like, hey, let me get to know you, learn about your needs first. Unfortunately, for a lot of B2B companies, there's like, I get it, there's not as many people who are able to do the legwork for that kind of long-term relationship building as there was maybe even a year ago. But just like trying to go wide, with these kind of blanket spammy things rather than going deep with taking the time to build a relationship. Going deep rather than going wide.
Absolutely.
So that's a big thing, I would say, for sure.
Really
thinking about like wider trends of the last year. We've seen this coming for a while, but emotional wellness has become such a more important topic. And that applies to, the work world as well. So much of work life and personal life are blended now.
Oh my God, Zoom fatigue, right?
Yeah. Part of me hesitates to even say have those virtual drinks because people are over it. But yeah, so emotional wellness is becoming a much bigger thing than in the past.
Yeah.
So it used to be, I remember doing a report in 2015 when I was at Cassandra, the Cassandra report. And it was really about this rise in, body, mind, soul, and wanting to be healthier from a more holistic standpoint. So it was around the time where all these boutique fitness companies started popping up, and then meditation started becoming more of a thing. And I remember what we would do too is when we would do our research, we would always segment a bit of the population who are more trendsetters. And I say that not as like social media influencers, it's people who are screened to meet a certain set of criteria about their way of thinking. So I guess I could describe it as more like people who were on the diffusion of innovation bell curve. It would be like the innovators and the early adopters to understand what was resonating with them so that we could get a sense of where culture might be heading a little bit. And I remember meditation came up as a thing then. It wasn't huge, there weren't like a ton of people into it, but the people who were those innovators and early adopters, they were really over-indexing on their interest in mindfulness and meditation. And then lo and behold, a couple of years later, and look at where we are today, it's become such a huge thing even before COVID hit and more people were stuck indoors and thinking about mental wellness in a new way. A lot of these platforms have been kind of, growing in popularity. So I would say now it's not just about physical wellness or mental wellness. It's about emotional wellness as well, social wellness. And I think our conversation about doing social good kind of ties to that.
Absolutely.
Because people are trying to think less selfishly. It's not just about, me and what am I doing for me? It's when I do something good for the world, it actually betters me as well. And they're thinking more about those things than they were in the past.
It's interesting thinking about this because it's almost as if B2B companies need a new attribution model, like a new way of thinking, because ROI is everything. It's like, even, in marketing, in my world, I remember starting that with all I did was like graphics and events, like that was it. What is it? What collateral does the sales team need? And that was it. And now I'm like a data analyst. I'm like a human-centered coach. Like I'm wearing all of these hats to help them understand all of these things tie together. And even that simplified message of, hey, marketing and sales need to be cohesive. That's hard to digest.
I know. It really is hard to digest because people are all of us, I think we do something for one way a really long time. It becomes hard to get out of that mindset. Even what we were talking about with this decks, and creating these deck cultures.
Yes.
Yes, of course, I guess you need a deck, but like people don't have to live and die like
By
decks.
the decks.
Yeah. And even for me in my role and putting research and insights in with marketing and pitching, that's a relatively new thing too. You know, research was always kind of off in its own little world. And now to have it integrated in other departments is, yeah, it's a shift. It's a shift for the industry. And I think a lot of creatives or a lot of people who maybe had a more traditional background, they kind of resent the whole idea that data and insights and this need to prove ROI has to have a say in it. And I totally get that. But I think it's about not just one being king or queen of it all. It's really more about just like a more communal approach. It's like,
A
hey,
balancing act, yeah.
research, listen to creative, listen to account people, and having all of these different voices have a say, and listen to your consumer most of all.
Absolutely. An absolutely holistic experience. So I'm curious to know, what are some of your thoughts, because you've done a lot in the B2C space that can easily be translated over to B2B. Just if you think creatively enough, what are some ideas that you think could translate over now that would like really resonate with the B2B audience?
Like Barilla pasta. They had something like B2C, they create a Spotify playlist for different pastas and like how long they had to cook. So you would, cool. You play the playlist, and by the end, like that particular pasta would be done cooking. And maybe there's like a fun way to customize something like that for your consumers or for your, as a B2B person, like what do they like? Or like, what are the tasks that you have to do in the B2B side?
Yeah.
You know, could you create like something custom for them? I'm not the most creative person, I will say, but I do think that no matter what it is, having that element of personalization is so important where you can. And I think you almost have to in the B space a little bit more, you know, since it's relationship driven. And we know that doing these like grand sweeping movements don't always work. Taking the time to actually create something personal is going to be more meaningful. But yeah, what have you seen that you like?
I will tell you, especially on now the digital space, now that I think that people have kind of like, oh, okay, fine, we're going to be at home. Are like one of the things that I'm in the process of planning is an online digital party. Like,
cool.
back in the day, like when I was doing events, we would literally have these happy hours, and we invite, you know, our prospects and some of our clients. We would pay for everything. It would be a DJ. It would literally be like being in college again, just so everyone can let their guard down and it would feel good. And we talked business, but it wasn't a forced conversation. And people always came out to this. And it was specifically it was the ambiance, because it was at a private club. It was in one of those like really private, upscale, places, invitation only kind of thing. So
those days.
I know it was so much fun. So now what I'm trying to focus on for sales and marketing is bringing them together and recreating that type of experience, but in a virtual world. So I would love to have you at it. I'll send you the invitation.
I would like that. Thank you.
So, I'm full on party, DJ, like the whole nine. So it feels less like another webinar. It feels less like another thing you're here to learn. Like you're here to have fun, put on some crazy socks, put on a crazy hat. Like, let's just be free and get to know one another and build real community. So I think, stuff like that is what we're missing. Just people are exhausted. They need something.
They need to like let out all that steam. Yeah, let it off. It's funny when you were talking about that, I was thinking about how, the conferences that I would go to, or just like the fun events around town, like Daybreaker. I don't know if you've been to those, where it's like the morning dance parties. That they have them all around the world. Gloria Stefan just like joined in one in the digital. They've gone digital this past year, but it's like those types of moments where you really form those connections with people that business springs out of. I find that it's rarely the reverse, where it's those forced like, let's have this serious conversation, about work. It's more about the personal stuff. And then the work comes after, like even at, CES or Cannes or all the different conferences I would go to, it wasn't so much of the talks or the lectures. Those were very interesting, but it wasn't really at those moments where those great relationships would happen. It would be those after hours, the parties, more private events where you really felt like you got to know people. It's really what a
Completely.
business is about.
Completely agree. I remember going to a Gartner conference in Vegas and none of the business got done at the booth. We spent like $75,000 to be there with this ridiculous booth. And everything we did, all the business we closed was at the exclusive dinner that we held, where we
Nice.
brought gift bags and they were customized and all of it. And that's where the business happened. I was like, what was the point of that?
Oh, isn't that the way it goes? Yeah.
It is.
For sure. What? Something that now that you bring it up, I went to this virtual event earlier this year. It was with a nonprofit organization, and even though it was virtual, what they did is they sent some physical things ahead of time to the participants, packages, so that you could have. There were just different elements of the conference that coincided with the items in the box that they sent you, so you could still have that physical touch point, which I think can really up the game for a lot of these kind of virtual experiences, creating those physical moments. And then even if you're going to have those big events, kind of like what you were talking about, those smaller intimate gatherings where people can really just let their hair down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Conversations. Those are so important.
Absolutely. So I have a crazy question, right?
Oh, okay.
Given all the research and everything that you've done, I'm sure at some point you maybe looked into the VR world. What do you think? Do you think the VR world will ever kind of cross over into the business, especially now that we're like, this is probably going to be our life for the foreseeable future?
I think it will, but I think it needs to become more social first. Because right now, the way it is in the VR experiences that I've had, I mean, they're very cool, but it's also it's still kind of uncomfortable and
kind of clunky.
The headsets. They're getting better with them. But at the end of the day, it's people, we're social beings and we want to be able to socialize within these realms. That once it becomes more social, it will take off in a bigger way. But I mean, feel free to prove me wrong, but I haven't really seen any great systems yet that allow you to socialize. It feels like a very solo experience still.
It does. I was wondering if you knew anything that it had evolved more, like gamification. I saw this tool called Zcon World that basically you can live in this, or you can experience a virtual world with multiple people, and the video pops up and you can go and experience these different rooms together without VR. It's all virtual online. And I was like,
not just kind of like a gaming sort of thing. Especially with younger generations. I would say Gen Zs and actually their parents, Gen X, like that's really become a big thing for them. Yeah, people, they're definitely like very immersed in these virtual worlds, and some brands have done really interesting things integrating into them. But I haven't seen only seen them in like a very gaming context. Like for a B2B, I haven't seen any like really cool examples yet. I know I've seen like brands will create their own, there's like a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts did something in Fortnite where they created like their own island or something like that. And then, there's these virtual concerts happening in Fortnite.
Roblox too. My kids play, so.
Oh yeah, I've heard good things about Roblox. I'm sure I'll be there in a couple of years when my little one gets older. There is a lot of potential there. I'm glad you brought it up. I was thinking VR is like very like headset worlds, but when you come to like the gaming community, like gaming has really exploded, especially in the last year. I mean, it was always big within certain segments, but now more than ever, like it's kind of very equalizing, women, men, you can be different races, and it's like there's still some problems I think that need to be worked out of like social etiquette that we hear about. But other than that, like it's like people with disabilities too, they can be at a more even playing field than say like in like playing sports with somebody in the physical world. That's obviously, there's a higher barrier to entry for certain people. And now like in the online realm, there's just a lot of possibilities, and it allows more people, I think, to participate than in the past. And they really, you hear good things about it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something there for sure.
Yeah, that now I want to go explore. I'm going to look at things that gamification for business, see how we can connect.
There's got to be somebody doing it. Maybe it should be us. We should
right.
Do it. Yeah.
That's right. The new startup, right?
For sure.
Well, the way I love to close out the show is by having you tell 2 truths and a lie and letting our audience decide which one is true in the comments.
Ooh, okay. My full maiden name is as long as the alphabet. I foster neighborhood cats, and I was born in Morocco.
Oh, I have no clue. I have no clue. Well, this was so much fun. Thank you, Rachel. It was
really fun. You're so easy to talk to, and thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully there were some good insights in there for you.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Gotta come up with our little gaming play for B2B.